So, Sly Cooper 3. This was one of those reviews, and what I mean by that is that I had some technical difficulties behind the scenes while trying to make the video. I mean, first my, capture device decided to not work for some reason. Who knew hardware needed to take a day off? A break, or whatever. Besides you, and the second thing that happened to me was that I got a cold, which at first I thought was gonorrhea, because, but thankfully it was just a cold. That said, with a cold comes strep throat, which meant I couldn't really do any voiceover work until I got better. So in the meantime, I platinumed the game. Yep, I platinumed Sly 3. And anyways, the last thing that happened to me was that I had to take an exit exam. Doctors need to take the medical board exam, and lawyers need to take the bar, and now engineers need to take the equivalent of that, which is exit exam. And I'm happy to say that I passed with Sonic Colors. So I need to finish one last remaining summer course, and I can work in a cubicle in an office for the rest of my life. Anyway, so let's start by jumping to the Sly 3 Honor Among Thieves history. Sly Cooper 3 Honor Among Thieves was released on September 26, 2005, which was 12 years ago. Yes, 2005 was 12 years ago. Anyway, upon the game's release, the game saw a lot of positive reviews, but not nearly the same positive feedback that Sly 2 got when it was first released. That said, the game did receive a better score from Edge than the second game did. Seriously, Edge, what the hell, a 7 and a 6? Well, to each his own, I guess. Anyway, regarding my personal experience with Sly 3, as I mentioned in my previous review, I got to episode 6 of Sly 2 before stopping to play Sly 3. Having played the game now, I remembered exactly where I stopped when I first played the game. I stopped after beating the second episode. And just for reference, the second game has 8 episodes while the third game has 6 episodes, which means that while I was closer to beating the second game as a kid, I was nowhere near beating the third game. And it is now time to change that, so let's start by jumping into the story. And as previously mentioned, we're going to be looking at the game through the HD Collection. The game is set 1 year after the events of Sly 2 Band of Thieves, though oddly enough, even though the second game ended with the gang going their separate way after Bentley got his leg injured, in the third game they're all back together. Well, back together with additional company with them on their mission to stop Dr. M, an evil scientist part-time baboon.
Mandrill.
What?
He's not a baboon, he's a mandrill. Both the mandrill and the drill were once classified as baboons in the genus Papio, but they now have their own genus called Mandrillus. Although they look superficially like baboons, they are more closely related to Cercebus mangabis. Mandrills are found in southern Cameroon, Gabon, Equatorial Guinea, and Congo. Mandrills mostly live in tropical rainforests.
Well, alright, I'm fine. I'm sorry if I offended any baboon mandrills out there. Well, anyway, the evil mandrill Dr. M has found the Cooper family's secret vault and is trying to break it and steal all the treasure that's in it. Sly Cooper, being Cooper, is set to stop him. The only problem is that Oh yeah, the black bars aren't covering the screen. But why? Seems like a simple problem to fix. That said, I take it that the art from the comm sections were also meant to cover the edges, but they don't. Same applies to the swimming sections.
This is it, Sly. The gang's assembled and are...
Thank God for HDMI. Anyway, that seems to be something that wasn't properly remastered. Now, I understand why when developers are remastering a trilogy that has a game that wasn't received all that well, why they would ignore it. I am, of course, talking about Devil May Cry 2. The Devil May Cry HD collection is a good collection. That said, in Devil May Cry 2's case, the remaster could have been done better. Some of the art assets should have been updated, and while I understand why they would be impossible to do in the case of FMVs, stuff like the art in the options menu should have been updated, even if this is Devil May Cry 2 we are talking about. Anyway, Sly 3 was a well-received game, so I don't understand why the remastering team neglected remastering that aspect of it. Whatever, I mean, it's just a few inches of black, so in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter. And yeah, back to the HD collection. I gotta say, why doesn't Dr. M just go in from the side to get into the vault? Does it have to be through this door? Is there some force field that I don't know about? Oh, this is a game about the family of thieving Brachunis. So... Anyway, while trying to stop Dr. M, Sly gets captured, and while he's being crushed like Goku, he has a long flashback. And by flashback, I mean we're gonna be playing everything that happened before we got to this point. And this is where I have to say I really dislike this. Jumping around timeline-wise is usually only done in TV shows and movies and not really in video games. Either case, I don't really like it. And Sly 3's case specifically, it wasn't done well. It was done about as well as the sentence I just blurted out. The thing about jumping around is that if not done well, it basically acts as a short spoiler and thus removes any anticipation or thrill the game may have had, and this is where Sly 3 falls into story-wise. We already know Sly has new friends, we already saw Dimitri swimming in the beginning, and Sly being the main character, it's pretty obvious that he's gonna survive the crushing. Speaking of surviving, that intro section basically spoiled that Sly survived the trap set by Captain Lefouille, or that Penelope survived being captured by him. Among other things, this intro scene was completely unnecessary and in my opinion actually ruins the story a little. To be fair to Sly 3, very few entertainment mediums are able to do the time jump well. Uncharted 2 for example did it really well. While the flashback happened at the beginning of the game, it happened at a point where the game is about 60% done and not at the final chapter. Furthermore, it hid enough information from the player to still keep the adventure to that point mysterious and interesting. I mean, before the flashback, all we know is that Drake's been shot. We don't know by who or even why. This intro section doesn't spoil who Flynn and Chloe are or their intentions, nor does it spoil where Elena and Sully are, and that execution made being chased with Sully exciting, and it's why having Elena's cameraman die and then the confrontation with the main villain be so freaking intense. And that's because the intro section gives enough to intrigue the player but at the same time not spoil anything, unlike Sly 3. Another game that did the time jump well was God of War Ascension. The fact that the game was a pre-equel to the first God of War game meant that the spoilers to the story were not that big of a deal. Since the game is a pre-equel, there wasn't much that we already as the player did not already know. But anyway, enough about that. Let's continue with the story of Sly 3. The flashback starts with a tutorial section. What? A tutorial section? Isn't this like the third game in the series?
Well, some people play the second or third game in a series before the first.
What? Who does that?
Some people do.
Oh, I hate those people. After the tutorial section, Bentley and Sly decide that they need their old good pal Murray back, who if you recall quit the gang after watching Bentley's leg get squashed by Clockwork's mouth. They learn that after training under a guru for a while, the guru told Murray to go to where the black water is, and not leave until the water is purified, after which Sly and Bentley learn that the black water is caused by an evil opera singer by the name of Octavio, who after rock music became popular, after that happened, no one wanted to hear opera anymore, so Octavio became a villain, wanting to sink Venice's major landmarks. Now, before moving on with the story, let's take a look at the new gameplay elements found in this game. Well, at first glance, the game does not seem that much different from its predecessor. You get the same type of hub worlds and the same type of mission structure, meaning they did not fix the major complaint I had with the second game. I still need to go back to the safe house, switch characters, then go all the way to the mission location. And to further add to that, they did not implement an instant go back to the safe house option, which means from time to time, I still need to exit the game and go back to the start menu, then load my save file again. Now, I don't mind this in certain instances, but not exactly all the time. I mean, take a look at Bentley's first mission in the game. After I went to the safe house and chose Bentley, then went to the mission, guess who showed up? Sly! Since this is a two-man mission, could somebody please tell me why did I have to go through the charade of switching characters, only to have both show up at the mission location? Well, that said, remember what I said earlier about the game not seeming different? While there are exceptions to this every now and then, like in the first mission, most of the game is actually not like this. The missions most of the time are actually placed in front of or near the safe house, significantly reducing the level of backtracking you have to do. I can probably count the number of times where I found the backtracking to be a nuisance with one hand. What further helps this is the fact that the clue bottles are gone, meaning there is no reason to waste your time in the world. Moreover, some of the hub worlds, at least to me, seem to be smaller than those of the second game. I'm guessing the reason behind this was so that the team could put in more work in the mission design. Because remember how one of my major complaints regarding the second game was that most of the missions not only took place in the hub worlds, thus making the hub worlds lose their charm, couple that with having to find all the clue bottles and the repeating style of missions, especially those key collecting ones, does explain why, at least to me, the second game felt exhausting if I tried to do everything. Which is why I stopped looking for the clue bottles in the second half of the game, and thus made the story move faster, which in turn to me made me enjoy the game more. Well, for the third game there are no clue bottles, the backtracking has been reduced, and most of the missions don't take place in the hub world. Honestly, the world design, mission variety, and execution in the third game is much better than the second game. I mean, the creativity in this game is endless, whether it be the boat chasing sequences, to the trap minigame set up by Bentley, to the RC gameplay, to the swimming sections, and a freaking pirate minigame where they give you an ocean plus a hub world to play around in, and plenty more. While sure, the story was not executed to my liking, it was still a fun story. I mean, those plans Bentley came up with were so much more elaborate than the second game.
Our only real competition will be Mugshot himself. We need to remove him from the competition. Here's the plan. I'll challenge him to a fist fight out in the town square. Sly, you find and lure Inspector Fox to the same place. When the two meet, the sparks are sure to fly. With some luck, the big guy will get carted off to jail, and we'll have clear skies for the finals. However, the Baron won't be so easy to deal with. He commands an enormous team of flyers and has been known to bring in a squad of limp gunships when things look grim. The answer to our problem isn't obvious, although it is potent. Behold, Lupus Gigantormus. I'll drug the beast so that the Guru will be able to ride it and take out some of the local guards, who also serve as the Baron's pilots. Obviously, the fewer enemy pilots Sly has to deal with in the finals, the better. Next, I'll hack into the aircraft control tower. If successful, I'll be able to intercept any messages the Baron might send to his gunships. All right, team, we've got all night to prepare.
That said, the mixing in these planning cutscenes is a little off, which again makes me wish there was more to this options menu that has a Now back to the story. After accomplishing all the different missions and challenges, hey, there's someone named Killer B here. That can't be a coincidence. Well, anyway, with everything the game has to offer in this episode, we now have to face the villain of this episode, Octavio. And after easily beating, hang on. What?
So that's it.
That wasn't hard. After that rather easy battle, Carmelita shows up and locks up Octavio for good. Oh, Carmelita, as you guys may know, she has a different voice for each of the 3 games. I thought her voice in the first game was pretty good, her voice in the second game was generic, and her voice in the third game as well. It's better than the second game, but she sounds like a prepubescent boy.
Stand your ground, soldier. We'll take them together.
Looks like X-Men's robots are here too.
So yeah, overall I liked her voice in the first game the best. That said, I still find her voice in the third game to be better than that of the second game. Anyway, after Octavio's arrest, Murray rejoins the gang, but before they could move on to their next objective, Murray wants to go back to his old master and get his blessing, and so the gang heads to Australia, where they discovered that the area is under lockdown thanks to a mining project. With the Guru nowhere to be found, after setting up a safe house and looking around for a bit, not only do we save the Guru, who is freaking awesome by the way because he can control enemies and make them run faster than Sonic the freaking Hedgehog, but the gang also goes out for a night in the town drinking lemonade and then kicking so much ass. Like seriously, why do these guys need to sneak around? They can take over any shit they want with brute force.
To a position near this giant crocodile. Your job is to throw the thugs into the mouth of the monster.
Teach him to like eating miners, huh? That's a sinister plan, Bentley. I approve.
Well, that's dark.
Oh yeah, cha-ching! Oh boy!
Whoa.
Giant scorpions! Run for it, mates!
You know, I wish I was able to talk in different accents because people, you know, an accent that's different from the American accent, like British or Scottish, they can get away with saying a few words that Americans can't. Like, cunt. Anyhow, I don't know if you noticed already, but this episode does not really have a villain because the villain in this episode is this mask. That when it attaches itself to someone increases their size and oh! Isn't this like every guy's fantasy?
Care to elaborate?
No, not really. After getting the mask off Carmelita and the Guru officially joining the gang,
What have I got?
the gang decides to take care of Carmelita before moving on to the next episode. As boredom was about to set in, they decided to have a little fun.
Didn't want her to go home empty-handed.
Alright, episode 3. For this episode, the gang figures that they need a mechanical specialist if they would want to be able to bring Dr. M's defenses down, and the person they find for the job is Penelope. However, she declines to join the gang unless they are able to beat her boss, the Black Baron. And so while Murray and Bentley build Sly a plane, Sly gets his pilot license, and so the chapter begins. And for me, this was one of the more entertaining chapters, whether it be drugging this wolf and taking control of him as the guru, or sneaking into our opponent's rooms to frame them for sabotage, or watching Bentley shit talk mugshot.
Your mother was a broken down tub of junk with more gentleman callers than the operator.
Nobody talks that way about my mother. Nobody!
Well, he certainly did not take that well. I love how Bentley just casually goes back to his polite self after that.
Town Square, 5 minutes. Please don't be late.
Well, no matter, one hit and he is done, and with that done, it's time to end this with the competition and kicking Black Baron's ass, who surprisingly enough put up a decent fight. After defeating the Black Baron, we learned that what? So yeah, that was a thing, and after that, the gang now has a new member, the mechanical engineering genius Penelope. The next member to join the Cooper gang after that is the Panda King? Really? Wasn't the Panda King like part of the fiendish five that broke into Sly's house and killed his father in the first game? Well, Sly is awfully forgiving.
I guess he doesn't want to talk. Sorry, Bentley. Let's go.
Be realistic, Sly.
Well, guess I was wrong. Sly and the Panda King end up clashing in each other's subconscious, or whatever you call what's happening here.
Insolent child.
Why do I feel like I've heard that before?
Petulant child! I will tolerate your insolence no more!
Not the same thing, but still pretty close. Anyway, after the Panda King snaps out of it, he informs everyone that he would only join the gang if they help him rescue his daughter, who has been kidnapped by this chicken over here.
Well, actually, to be more specific, General Tsao is a rooster, and roosters are general... Oh, sorry, my search function turns on by default every time I wake up.
It's the little moments. Anyhow, General Tsao, a rooster, wants to force the Panda King's panda daughter to marry him, and so the gang is set on ruining the wedding plans and rescuing the Panda King's daughter from this chicken one place. That said, this is definitely one of my favorite episodes in the game. There's just so much in it, whether it be Murray finding the van that was lost in the second game when the gang hid inside the container that was pulled into the sky, thus having to leave the van behind, or blowing up shit with the Panda King, or playing with Penelope's RC car trying to save Murray. Not to mention that the writing was clever and on point.
Who needs friends when you can have servants? Who needs affection when you can have obedience? Why try to convince you when I can simply destroy you?
And of course, the ever so controversial...
She's a woman! She doesn't know up from down!
What? Look at that! A villain said something bad. And here I thought villains were supposed to be nice and courteous. I mean, I get that they're villains, but that doesn't mean they have to be mean or rude.
Let's go!
Also, I rather enjoyed the protect the vase section in the game before the fight with General Tsao. Reminded me of that scene in Rush Hour where Jackie Chan was basically doing the same thing. Anyway, speaking about the fight with General Tsao, aside from the fight being a rather creative fight, well, actually almost all the boss fights in this game are creative and fun. I mean, sure, there are your common dodge and hit bosses, but for the most part, every boss tries to do something different and interesting, like fighting the thing that ate Johnny Depp, or protecting your hangar from mugshot, or fighting Dr. M underwater, and more. Anyway, after the fight, you rescue the Panda King's daughter, and the Panda King joins the gang. And with that done, we get to move to what is my favorite episode in the entire game.
Sure, every man's entitled to their opinion.
Isn't that like every YouTube comment section? Every YouTube comment section? Anyhow, the pirate episode, my god did they nail it right with this episode. This chapter actually removed a complaint I was going to mention, which was the removal of the clue bottles. Why was that a problem? Because it meant that the only way you could get new abilities is by buying them from the net. Factoring in player satisfaction, this doesn't come close to what the first or second game offered. I know I'm beating a dead horse at this point, but having more upgrades as you progress through a game is one of my personal favorite aspects of a video game. It's the reason why I'm more of a Mega Man guy than I am a 2D Mario guy. In the 2D Mario games, you go through obstacles for a while and then you rescue the princess. Aside from the stage design, there's nothing different between the Mario that you start the game with and the Mario that you beat the game with. The same can't be said about Mega Man, because after beating a boss you get their power. You can also get armor upgrades that give you certain abilities, or heart containers that increase your overall total health. Or energy tanks, or the adapter. Many games do this, whether it be Symphony of the Night and its transformations, Devil May Cry and the boss weapons, Spyro 2 with the swimming ability. It's always exciting, always makes things more interesting, and stops things from getting dull. Unfortunately, a good upgrade big path is missing from Sly 3. In fact, aside from the power-ups that you need to be able to progress the story, I did not really buy anything from the shop. I mean, the game doesn't even have the easy money you were able to get from artifacts that were placed in numerous locations in a level in the second game. Granted, pickpocketing from enemies gives you more money than it did before, and now unlike the previous game where only Sly could pickpocket, now Bentley and Murray are also able to do it. Bentley uses a magnet while Murray shakes the ever-living hell out of the enemies. But do you want to know what that introduces? Grinding. Something that is typically found in JRPGs. Honestly, a little weird finding it in a platforming game. That said, they should have made making money easier, or at least offered numerous ways of getting money. Like take Infamous for example, another Sucker Punch game. In that game, you buy upgrades using experience points, and whenever you would beat a mission, the game would throw some experience points your way, allowing for a steady trajectory of upgrade gain. Now, I know that in Infamous it's experience points, while in Sly it's money. Since that's the case, then just leave a treasure or a memento from the enemies at the end of every mission that Sly can steal and sell. Speaking of the Infamous and Sly comparison, I'm guessing Sucker Punch's attempt at adding different dialogue options evolved into being the karma system in Infamous. But anyway, lucky for us that while Sly 3 doesn't have a variety of means of acquiring money, it has something else. Wanna know what it is? A pirate minigame. When I die, I want to be cremated and then have my ashes over a pirate ship. My God, I spent so many hours playing this minigame, destroyed over 70 ships and got the highest rank available. I could not stop playing it. For this episode, the developers did not only create a hub world for the mission, but an entire ocean where you can have as many ship battles as you want, and I found them addictive as hell. Furthermore, the pirate ship minigame solves the money issue, because you can get a ton of cash by playing it. While I think that elevates some of my criticisms regarding acquiring the upgrades in this game, it doesn't completely. And the reason is because the pirate episode is the episode before the final episode, so you're gonna have to play about 6 hours before having access to it, which means that for the first 6 hours your only way of getting money for the upgrades is by pickpocketing, which can be fun if you're lucky, but if you're anything like me, then yeah. And the last thing regarding the abilities is that while there are new ones, most are just the same abilities from the previous game, especially in Sly's case. Now I understand that coming up with newer abilities every game is rather impossible, which is why in most games, developers just have you start with a stripped down version of your character. That said, it's still entirely possible to make a sequel and still let your character keep his abilities from the older games, while still giving them newer abilities, because again, look at Infamous. Cole in Infamous 2 starts with most of his abilities and acquires vastly different and interesting abilities throughout the entire game. But anyway, the ability thing is a minor thing to me. It would have been nice if there was a proper system for it, but luckily the variety of the minigames, missions, and the pirate ships keep things entertaining. Speaking of the pirate ships, a lot of games can learn from Sly 3. Nowadays, to most developers, more content simply means filling up the map with a large amount of meaningless, repetitive, and dull side quests, which makes the player do the same thing over and over again. But personally, I found that when a game adds a simple gameplay element, a minigame of sorts that is different from the main game, that it actually tends to be a hit with most players, like playing Sfida in Dark Cloud 2 or raising Chow in Sonic Adventure 2, or now the pirate ships in Sly 3. Because again, adding more content is not the same as copying and pasting the same missions with only a slight variation. These games and many more get that. The example I really want to show is the game room in the Super Mario 64 remake, but of course, as you guys know, Nintendo. That said, I get the irony that Sly 3 has additional missions and tasks that are exactly what I praised the game for not being, which is copying the same missions with only a slight variation, such as beating a stage as fast as you can before the time runs out, or completing certain challenges with half health. But at the same time, it's not all the same like the treasure hunting minigame, but I feel that the game is long enough and does enough different things that with or without the additional tasks, the game does not really lose anything. And speaking about the game's length, this is actually one of people's major complaints with the third game, and it's that the game is too short, and that is a consensus that while is true, I disagree that it's a bad thing, because the game is 10 hours. That's not really short, that's longer than most adventure games released nowadays. Moreover, while the game is shorter than the second game, I would argue that that was for the best. There's a difference between a game that you want to play even after it's done, and a long game where you're stuck playing it until you beat it. I have mentioned this before. I felt that while the second half of Sly 2 was amazing, the slow start really hurt the game, and having beat the game, if I were ever to replay it, I highly doubt I would start a new game. I will more than likely start with the Contessa chapter. The same can't be said for Sly 3, because even though the game averages at 10 hours while Sly 2 averages at 15 hours, I actually spent more time playing Sly 3 than Sly 2. Played Sly 3 for 17 hours, while I played Sly 2 for 15 hours, and that's because even after beating the game, I could not put it down. I played the pirate minigame for hours. You know what this means. So I played the pirate minigame for hours till I got the highest rank. I beat all the extra missions, unlocked all the extra abilities, and I platinumed the game. I did that not because I had to beat the game, I did that because I wanted to, unlike in Sly 2 where I have to play the game for 15 hours stealing keys again and again and again. Speaking of keys, if I remember correctly, Sly 3 had one get the key mission, and even with that mission, it was different from the standard just get the key mission. You had to team up with Bentley to trick the guards. A good short game is better than a longer one that feels like it drags on, which in Sly 3's case, again, the game is not really short, it's 10 hours. Statistically speaking, in my experience, it's longer than most games in this genre. Hell, it's 4 hours longer than the first game. And as I mentioned earlier, despite it being shorter than the second game, I played it more than the second game. That said, some of it has to do with the fact that I had a cold that came with a nasty case of strep throat, so I really could not do any voiceover work until I got better. But yeah, I still chose to play Sly 3 over all the other games I own. Now with the game's length out of the way, it's time to talk about another thing that detractors of this game like to point out, and that's the multiple playable characters. While the second game had multiple playable characters and minigames, for some reason they think that the third game went too far, and I'm sorry, but I just don't see it. Remember how I said Sly 2 sets the gold standard on how multiple playable characters should be in a video game? Well, I'm happy to report that Sly 3 sets the platinum standard on how multiple playable characters should be in a video game. Because while the game does add 4 new characters, the Guru, the Panda King, Penelope, and Dimitri, the game does not force you to play as them in a way that does not highlight their abilities. They are mostly saved for the different minigames in the game, while the main trio do the heavy lifting. So for example, Penelope is a mechanical engineer, so it does not make sense for her to do any platforming like Sly, or heavy punching like Murray. Instead, whenever you get to play as her, you do so through her gadgets, whether it be using her RC car or chopper, and again, the same applies for the rest of the characters. Dimitri has his swimming gear, so obviously all the underwater segments are done by him, and that's what I mean. The game plays to each of the characters' abilities instead of against them. This is where Spyro 3 could have learned from Sly Cooper. Take Bentley from Spyro 3, and the Panda King. Both are offensive characters, therefore they have high power but slow speed, and while Sucker Punch designed the Panda King stages around that fact in the sense that you don't really need to travel anywhere, and instead you need to focus on either killing as many enemies as you can or beating a tentacle boss in a small space, God of War style. Insomniac on the other hand, in most cases just gave the characters platforming stages regardless if the stages fit the character or not, and as a result most of Spyro 3 stages as the different characters come off as messy, while the different character stages in Sly 3 come off as natural, smooth transitioning, and fun as hell. Of course, I tend to give Spyro 3 a pass on this because Spyro 3 was a PS1 game released in 2000 before the GameCube and PS2 came out, while Sly 3 came out in 2005, like 2 months before the Xbox 360 came out, so the genre was pretty well established at the point when Sly 3 came out. One final note regarding this is that the second game had plenty of minigames, and if the minigames in the second game were implemented in the third game, I wonder if people would complain. What I mean by this is that there are a lot of chopper minigames in the second game, controlled by Bentley. If Penelope was in the second game and she controlled the chopper, would people still complain? Same applies to Sly and Dimitri. What if Sly did the underwater sections and not Dimitri? Would fans of the second game make as big of a deal? I mean, the underwater mechanics are completely different and original, so whoever is underwater is basically a character skin. Hell, Murray could have been under there. I am curious about that since the multiple playable characters are done so well that I'm at a loss on why people would dislike the third game solely based on that. Because all the characters are fun and interesting to listen to, and all I see is that the Cooper family got bigger. Speaking of that, Carmelita is a playable character in this game. Woof. She is definitely one of my favorite characters to control. Her jump is so high, she has a wide shooting range, just get an enemy in that and the bullet will auto lock. She is so overpowered that I think she provides a nice change of pace. And this goes back to my point regarding Spyro 3. When Sucker Punch added Carmelita as a playable character, they did not take away any of her abilities in order to balance her out. She has a high jump, moves pretty fast, and her weapon is lethal as hell, and this is what Spyro 3 should have done. Not add characters and then remove possible elements that could have made them fun to play as. One of my favorite missions in the game is where Sly and Bentley grab an empty battery, and the only way they found to charge it is by tricking Carmelita into shooting at the battery with her electric gun. When we do find Carmelita, the game switches to her, and now we have to hit Sly to charge up the battery. You don't find many games that switch perspectives in this clever way. But anyway, that covers my thoughts regarding the game's length and the different playable characters. The game is long enough that it keeps the story moving and engaging, while the different playable characters keep things varied and fun that especially helps with the game's lack of proper character upgrade path. But anyway, let's wrap up the story by starting the final chapter. If you recall, I don't know, about 9 hours ago when we started this game, before Sly had the flashback, he was being crushed. And it is at this point that Carmelita shows up to the rescue with her overpowered gun to rescue Sly, which is ironic because just a few moments ago...
Funny, but here I am at the end and suddenly all I can think about is what a coward I've been towards Carmelita. I never took the next step.
Oh, I don't know, maybe because she's a cop, or the fact that she's as dedicated to justice as Yagami Soichiro. The only thing that could make these two a couple is if Sly somehow gets amnesia, and thus make him innocent of all the crimes he committed so far. Nah, doubt that's gonna happen. After Carmelita saves Sly, the gang attempts to get Sly's cane, which was lost when he was fighting Dr. M earlier. After doing a few missions and getting the cane back, which involved a rather challenging yet fun boss fight with Dimitri, we play a rather annoying minigame. Generally, the minigames in the game are all well designed and play well, but some do fall into that Sly 1 category of minigame, where I feel that some people will have problems with them because they might be a little too challenging for the average player, like this one, or the chopper one I mentioned earlier, where it drags on for far too long with the enemies having an annoying habit of always being on top of you. But anyway, finishing that minigame, hitting Dr. M with the cane because he was being a baboon.
Mandrill.
Using it as an insult here, Cables.
Oh.
We head into the Cooper vault, which could only be opened with Sly's cane. After getting inside, the gang learns that only Sly could proceed forward because the place has been designed around his abilities. And so Bentley and Murray stayed behind to watch Sly's back as he went deep inside the cavern to deal with... And after Bentley and Murray beat a few enemies, including the persistent Dr. M, Bentley says the dumbest thing ever.
Do you ever feel like you're playing second fiddle to Sly? Like he treats us as sidekicks?
I can't even begin to describe how stupid this scene is. I mean, character development does not need to be shoved in for the sake of character development. How long have those three known each other? Since they were orphans in an orphanage when they were like this tall? And besides, how many adventures have they been through together? They saved each other from prison, for God's sakes, and Sly did that mid-air platforming sequence to save them from clockwork. This scene was totally unnecessary and stupid. I get what they were going for. Dr. M is Bentley and McSweeney is Murray and Sly's father is, well, Sly. Dude, Sly went in by himself because he's the only one capable of performing the necessary gymnastics to get to the end of the vault.
I'm about to head inside the vault, and I want you and Murray to come with me. We're a team, a family. We should do this together.
Well, anyway, after getting to the end of the vault, we learned that Dr. M escaped Bentley and Murray and has made his way to us, so now it's up to Sly to beat the old baboon. Well, we were gonna beat him until Carmelita showed up, where Sly had to basically act as a shield before she got hot. She got hit. Okay, she got hit. So after that, Sly forgets his memories and the place crumbles on top of Dr. M's head, which I get the irony of being trapped with the thing he has desired for so long. While it's a cliche, I actually like this aspect of the ending. The animation at the end is so symbolic, but anyway, that's about the only thing I liked about the ending, because after that, due to Sly and Carmelita being a couple now because Sly forgot his memories or lost his memories, the gang disbanded. And something about that rubbed me the wrong way, honestly. Maybe it's the fact that we spent this entire game making new friends, meeting older enemies, and forgiving previous foes to make one awesome gang, but to have that just destroyed at the end is just I mean, how long were Sly and Carmelita together for? I don't know, but it was long enough for the gang to disband. Perhaps Dr. M was right after all. The ending does not depress me too much because we did get a sequel to Sly 3, and while I did not play it yet, I know that at least the main gang is back together. The reason I did not play it yet is because I know that the ending to the game is a cliffhanger, and I really don't want to see that cliffhanger without having something like Sly 5 to resolve it. But who knows, I might review it one day. And with that covered, we are done with the Sly trilogy. So what do I think about the games in general? Well, unlike the Spire trilogy, where I'm able to easily classify the order with which I favor them, I really can't do that with the Sly trilogy, because looking at the first game, it's completely different from its sequels. It doesn't even try to do the same thing, therefore it's not logical to pit it against Sly 2 or 3. So putting Sly 1 aside, we come to the second and third game, and my general thoughts regarding them is that I think that the second half of Sly 2 is the series high point, i.e. from episode 4 onward. The gameplay is on point and the story is at its most exciting in the series, but what stops the game from being my favorite is the slow start, namely episodes 1 to 3, along with the repeated missions and the lack of variety, but again the second half of the game is so good that it more than makes up for it. And lastly, we come to Sly 3. If I were to look at both games as a full package, I would say that Sly 3 is the better game, because it doesn't have any low points. The gameplay as well as the story are fun all the way through. The only problem with it is that while the game does not have any low points, at the same time it doesn't reach the highs of the second game's second half, making Sly 3 a fun experience and nothing else, which in a way to to me at least makes both games equal, and I honestly can't choose between the two. Both games do different things well, and they both do other different things in a less than perfect way, which results in both games being just as good as each other. Now, I do realize that that seems like I'm taking the easy way out, but I personally have no problem with ranking games in terms of which I think is better, but I just simply can't do that for the Sly trilogy for the reasons I mentioned earlier. That said, all three games are super fun, and you're getting one hell of a deal thanks to the HD collection, which I highly recommend for any platforming fan out there. Well, speaking about the HD collection, I feel like I should mention that every one of the three games had one glitch or two. Now again, I don't know if these are problems that are also present in the PS2 versions, or is it only a problem present in the HD collection, or even might just be my PS3. But regardless, the first game crashed on me in this place and only worked after a few attempts. The second game freezed on me during this comp section, and while the third game did not freeze on me, there was an audio error that happened here.
Find a Team Belgium pilot and get him laughing so hard that Bentley can make the pull. This is serious.
But for this one, I did not even need to restart the game. All I had to do was go back to the start menu and load the game back up again. And that solved the problem for me. This audio error happened to me twice, but I can't really remember where it happened to me the second time. But anyway, considering that I played this collection close to 40 hours, 2 freezing cases and an audio error are hardly enough to ruin me recommending the HD collection. Now let's talk about the additional content the HD collection offers. The collection also has 4 minigames for some reason that are like a minute long and have no purpose to them whatsoever. The first one involves you pushing a button, then pulling the controller towards you to grab the thing. The second minigame involves you shooting targets that look like they can test out for points. And the third minigame involves you controlling Bentley's chopper through a ring obstacle course. And the last minigame is, well, this. So, okay. Speaking of the last of things, lastly, the HD collection is available on the Vita, and it's a version I sadly don't own. But since I've never really been a portable gaming kind of person, especially considering the fact that I have no way to record my Vita. And this was my review of Sly 3 Honor Among Thieves. I'm sorry this video took so long to make, but you know, first off, I didn't think that the script would be this long, and secondly, all the stuff I mentioned earlier. Look, this is one of those reviews that I'll always remember for both good and bad reasons. The game being the good and, well, the other stuff being the bad. But anyways, we're gonna be jumping ship from the PS2 to the PS3. You know, review a trilogy on the PS3. But first we need to talk about the elephant in the room, E3. So, Sucker Punch, the makers of Sly Cooper, have yet to reveal or do anything for a while actually. So I'm willing to bet good money that they have something this year at E3. Whether it be a new Sly game, a new Infamous game, or an entirely new IP. Either way, you know, anyways, so with that being said, for those of you who are watching, wherever you may be in this world, thank you guys for watching, and you know, I hope you guys enjoy E3 this year, and you know, stay alive until the next video.
He's here somewhere. Keep your eyes open.